With the release of Dexter Resurrection, we now have 11 seasons of Dexter content. That means it's time to rank them all from worst to best. Just for context, I've only seen each season once, and it's been years since I watched the original Dexter. I ranked them all the best I could from my memory, however, because it's been such a long time since I've watched them, I may get some small details wrong. I have an older video where I rank just the 8 seasons of the original run of Dexter. If you're interested in checking that out, I'll put the link right here. And of course, as per usual, I will include some mild spoilers, but nothing serious. Without further ado, let's get started. In last place easily is going to be Season 6. Season 6 is by far the weakest season in my opinion. The central idea of Dexter exploring religion isn't a terrible idea, but it never really comes to a definitive thematic conclusion. The side characters don't really have anything to do, and both LaGuerta and Quinn become incredibly unlikable characters. On top of that, the two villains are incredibly underwhelming, and the twist is incredibly obvious. Also, this season features the worst subplot in the entire Dexter franchise, the idea of Debra being romantically in love with Dexter. Who came up with that idea? The one element of this season that I sort of kind of like is Mos Def's character of Brother Sam. He's an interesting foil to Dexter, however, he is removed from the series before anything interesting is done with his character. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Season 8. What a letdown Season 8 was. It felt like the writers had run out of ideas and at this point were just making up BS. The side characters in this season have nothing interesting to do. The whole Masuka daughter side plot goes nowhere. On top of that, Debra becomes an incredibly annoying character here, and her arc is super repetitive. The brain surgeon is a pretty bland villain. I suppose he's not the worst villain this series ever had, but he's definitely down there. There are also a lot of side characters that are introduced and have potential to go somewhere interesting, but just don't. And of course, there's the infamous original series finale, which undoes all of Dexter's character development. It ends on a very vague and undefined note. So overall, this season only ever so slightly outinches Season 6 for me, but it's still a pretty bad season. At number 9 is going to be Dexter New Blood. This little miniseries was another massive disappointment. While it starts out okay, it goes downhill pretty consistently with each episode. This season has no idea what it wants Dexter's arc to be. It never really establishes a starting point for his character arc, so by the time it tries to give him an end to his arc at the end of the series, it just feels underdeveloped. Harrison is a truly unlikable character. His teen angst gets old incredibly fast. And of course, the finale to this season is absolutely atrocious. Dexter just completely abandons the code and kills an innocent person out of nowhere, and then decides that the world is better off without him, and decides that he needs to die, again, out of nowhere. The only kind of upside to this season is I do like Clancy Brown's character. Clancy Brown as an actor is a fun addition to the franchise, and he has a different vibe than other Dexter antagonists. So from here on up, there's a pretty big gap. All the seasons except my bottom 3 I would give at least a positive response to. At number 8 is going to be Season 3. Season 3 is probably just the most mediocre season of Dexter. There's nothing all that great about it, but there's also nothing overtly wrong with it. I do like the central idea here of Dexter making a friend, and of course I love the character of Miguel Prado played by Jimmy Smits. Smits gives a fantastic performance and the character is very interesting and layered.
Wow, I didn't get it before, Miguel, but you can't be reasoned with, guilted, controlled. This whole back and forth game for leverage is pointless.
That's right. I'll do what I want, when I want, to whomever I want. Count on it.
I will.
However, the Skinner is by far the weakest villain in the entire Dexter franchise, and I didn't really care for Deb's romance with Anton. So if my bottom 3 slots were filled with the bad seasons, Season 3, my number 8 slot, is probably the only really mediocre season. From here on out, all the seasons I like and I would give a positive review to. From here on out are seasons that I would consider to be good. At number 7 is going to be Original Sin. Even though this is a little bit low on the list, I liked Original Sin a lot more than other people did. I thought it did a perfect job capturing the vibe and the feel and the tone of the original Dexter. I think the casting is great, especially Patrick Gibson, and the characters are a ton of fun. And I like the way that the show kind of transitions the Dexter we meet here into the Dexter that we meet in the original. I also really enjoyed the flashbacks to Harry's relationship with Dexter's mother. I found myself very invested in their relationship even though I knew how it would end. I do feel like the villain plotline here is a little bit weak though. His motivations are pretty generic, and the fact that there's been another serial killer at Miami Metro does feel a little bit like a retcon. Number 6 is going to be the new kid on the block, and that's Dexter Resurrection. Resurrection was just such a breath of fresh air after how disappointing Season 8 and New Blood were. I love the way that this season redeems Harrison and makes him likable, as well as how it makes us invested in the relationship between Dexter and Harrison. The main plotline about a social group for serial killers was handled very well and introduced a lot of interesting new characters. I also love the way that the series kind of honors the vibe and the feel of the original Dexter, but also has its own tone and aesthetic. I was a little bit let down by the last 2 episodes. It felt like they sidestepped the main source of tension for just kind of a standard season of Dexter. That being said, I still really enjoyed this season and can't wait for Season 2. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Season 2. Season 2 is by far the most overrated season in my opinion. There are of course things that I like about it. I do like Doakes' obsession with Dexter and how his obsession heightens over the course of the season. I also really do like Dexter's relationship with Lila because of how it grows him as a character and all of the lessons that he's able to learn from her. However, I do feel like this season's plotline happened way too early. It feels like this should have been the plotline for the second to last season, not the second season of this entire show. And of course, there's the season finale where the show kind of sidesteps the moral dilemma of what to do with Doakes. I don't mind it because it's only the second season of the show and a show that they wanted to run for at least 4 or 5 seasons. However, this was the first instance of something that the show started to make a habit of, which is set up a interesting moral dilemma for Dexter and then kind of sidestep it and have him not have to face the consequences of that dilemma. I also didn't really care for the plotline about LaGuerta feuding with the other police captain. It just kind of felt like filler. So overall, this is still a really good season. There is still a lot of great tension here. However, I've just never quite loved it as much as everyone else seems to. At number 4 is going to be Season 7. Season 7 is massively underrated because of how it switches up the Dexter formula. Instead of having like one central plot line, there are kind of 3 or 4 central plot lines that slowly intertwine over the course of the season. I love Isaac Sirko as a villain. Not only is he by far the most sympathetic villain in the series, but he's also just a different type of antagonist for Dexter to face. And this season is one of the only seasons of the entire franchise where each side character is given their own interesting side plot. Particularly, this is probably the only season where LaGuerta is actually given a relevant side story. Her pursuit of Dexter actually makes sense diegetically and it's super suspenseful. I also think this season is by far Jennifer Carpenter's best performance. This season kind of elevates her to being a co-lead alongside Dexter, and she absolutely brings her A-game acting-wise. The only criticism I have is that I do wish the Isaac Sirko and the Hannah McKay plot lines intertwined a little bit more, but overall, a really good season of television. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Season 5. Season 5 is probably the most underrated season of Dexter. I love Dexter's relationship with Luren. The actors have really good chemistry and their bond doesn't feel forced. I also love seeing Dexter struggle to be a single dad. Plus, this season has my favorite episode, probably the entire franchise, Teenage Wasteland. However, this is also where the cracks in the series really started to show. This season is where it became incredibly frustrating how often Dexter was just able to get away without suspicion. I also don't really love the Barrel Girl gang as villains. I like Johnny Lee Miller's performance, but his character is a bit underdeveloped, and the rest of the gang is pretty bland. I also didn't really care for the Fuentes brothers subplot, especially when you consider that it didn't really go anywhere. Lastly, the season finale is a bit of a mixed bag. I love the resolution to Lumen's arc, and I love the scene between her and Dexter on the boat. However, the way in which the series writes Lumen out feels very written and doesn't make a lot of sense diegetically. So Season 5 definitely has its ups and its downs, but I do think the ups outweigh the downs. Our runner-up is going to be Season 1. What a great introduction this series is to the world of Dexter. The tone and the aesthetic of the series are perfectly established here, and what the season does best is introduce the character of Dexter. We perfectly understand the way that he thinks and kind of why the way that he thinks determines his actions.
Open your eyes and look at what you did!
It also does a great job introducing the ensemble of characters around Dexter and defining Dexter's relationship with each character. Plus, it has a really intriguing mystery with the identity and motivation of the ice truck killer. If this season had just been a one-off miniseries, it still would have gone down as a cult classic among horror TV. That being said, it's not quite my favorite season of the franchise. As I think most of you could predict, my favorite season of Dexter is Season 4. Dexter Season 4 is one of the greatest TV seasons of all time. And it works so well because they picked a central idea to focus on, which is Dexter wondering if he can balance being both a serial killer and a family man. And it has by far the best villain of the franchise in John Lithgow's Trinity Killer. Lithgow gives one of the best performances in all of TV history here. I really love the relationship that Dexter forms with Arthur and how Arthur's able to open up to him in a way he can't to everybody else. This season also does a great job ramping up tension as it goes on. It leads to one of the most shocking season finales of all time. If I had to throw one criticism at it, I do feel like this season wastes a little bit of time in the middle. The bit where Dexter saves Arthur just so that he can kill him himself feels like it's just there to pad out the runtime. I also didn't really care for the Christine Hill character. It felt like she was there just to give Quinn something to do, and the whole twist regarding her character didn't really contribute much to the season. But overall, this is still a great season of television, one of the greatest of all time. So that's it, that's my ranking of the Dexter seasons. What were your favorite and least favorite seasons of Dexter? Let me know down below. If you want to see my older Dexter ranking video, click this link right here. It only includes the 8 seasons of the original run. However, because I made that video after I just finished watching the original run, I go into a lot more detail about each season. If you want to see more Dexter content, click this playlist right here. As for always, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Bye.